you had a very interesting journey, Christine. Because when we got together, we were in the same prenatal classes within the maternity group that we were in with midwives, and we were like, you were a month ahead of me because you were due in April, and you thought 40 weeks, right? And you're a 42-week mama, and you didn't know that.
No.
And your babies are smaller than mine, so how fair is that? So I was in the class with you, and we were just soaking up all this learning, and we both really thought, like you thought too, that we were going to have these natural births and we were going to have all of our power. And I was having a home birth and you were having a hospital birth, and it was going to be natural and wonderful. And what happened?
What happened? Oh, lots happened. It's funny that you mentioned the 42-week thing, because the last couple weeks on Facebook, my memories keep popping up, and it's me pregnant, like heavily pregnant, because he was due April 8th, right? So like last week. And
yes.
So there's like a picture of me at 38 weeks being like, ooh, baby can come anytime. And then it's at 40 weeks and I'm like, still here. And then I'm like, oh honey, you still have 2 more weeks. But yeah, so first pregnancy was definitely interesting. The pregnancy itself was very standard and had no issues or anything. And then as the due date approached, there just seemed to be more and more pressure. I'd show up for my midwife appointment, and his head would not be descended. It was still of what you call palatable, so you could bump his head around. And because of that, I was measuring really far ahead. So instead of measuring 40 weeks, I was measuring closer to 43 weeks, but that was because he wasn't descending.
Right.
Yeah. And then at 41 weeks, I was offered a sweep and a cervical check. And by then I was like, why is this kid not coming out? And so I was taking whatever I could get. And so I was offered a sweep, and then they couldn't really do a sweep because I wasn't dilated or effaced or anything. So they just kind of like poked around in there and was like, maybe something will happen. And I proceeded to get sweep and non-stress tests and ultrasounds basically every other day for the next week and a half. And then at my 42-week appointment, where I was at the hospital getting a non-stress test, I got the results of my non-stress test that everything was fine. Heart rate was fine. Fluid was fine. The only issue is that we're now at 42 weeks. What do you want to do? And I remember talking to my midwife and saying, I don't want to get induced. What is there that we can do? Like, how much longer can this possibly go on? Like, what do you mean his head hasn't come down? What do you in 42 weeks, things are supposed to happen. And I remember her saying, well, we don't really have a lot of options at this point. I can't continue to see you at 42 weeks. You have to get a consult with an OB. And so I'm still at the hospital, and they bring in an OB, and he's talking to me, and he's saying there's really no point in you continuing to be pregnant. You're 42 weeks. It
was the one I'm thinking of, right? The certain OB, the one I'm thinking of.
Probably. Am I allowed to say who it is?
No.
Okay. Well, it's certain OB. And
yes, Jenny knows who we're talking about. Jenny's here. She's watching.
Okay. And so he basically was really pressuring me to be induced. And then the other bombshell information was he said, you either get induced today and you can have your midwife attend, or I can keep seeing you and I'm willing to let you go another couple days. I can continue to see you, but then you don't get your midwife. You get me. And I never met this man before in my life.
What is he doing? Rule over the midwives or something?
It seems like there's some licensing issues. Whether about how far into a pregnancy they can go. I think it's 43 weeks though, so I could have completed those 42 weeks, but I'm not entirely sure.
It is 43 because when we went to the second midwife practice, that's what we were told.
Yeah, and so, but because these midwives, remember, they were not a full midwife practice; they were a midwife doctor practice, so they kind of had their hands tied as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I went ahead with the induction because I was basically given like no choice. You can keep going for a couple days, but then you lose the support system that you've developed over these 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also first-time mom, and I don't know anything about Bishop scores. I don't know anything about anything. They're telling me that I should get induced. I'm as far along as any pregnancy I've ever heard of. And so like we went ahead with the induction. So, 5 minutes later, he's putting Cervidil in and I'm sent home. My husband and I went to White Rock and had like a, final date day or whatever. And I started getting contractions, like the middle of the night. So it was the next day, like 3, 4 a.m. or whatever. I started getting contractions. So we called the hospital and they said, okay, you're due for your next thing of Cervidil, so you might as well come in and we'll check you out and get that going. So we go to the hospital. I call my doula. She arrives at the hospital with us. And when I get to the hospital, I am contracting pretty good, like I'm fairly uncomfortable. They remove the Cervidil, which makes the contractions a little bit better, a little less intense. And then they check me, and I was 6 centimeters. So
Cervidil did quite a bit.
Yeah, I was 6 centimeters, but his head was still palatable. So his head still not descended into my pelvis. And then, so a different OB is called in because the risk now is that I'm 6 centimeters, my water could break anytime, and there's not a head plugging the way. It could potentially be his cord that comes first, right? So they want to break my water and control his descent to make a head come rather than a cord. So then, of course, I agree to that.
You can close up again.
Yeah. So, of course, I agree to that. And the instant they break my water and put his head in, he starts having deceleration. Yeah. The instant, as my next contraction after that, he started having decels. And so, they're talking to me for a while about like what that could mean. That it's pretty normal for their heart rate to go down during contraction and then come back up, and they're not too concerned about it at first. And then they start getting worse, and he starts not being able to recover. And I'm still only 6 centimeters, and they've been letting these T cells go on for about 2 hours, and I haven't progressed any. His heart rate's not doing well. My midwife keeps trying to put me in different positions and try different things. The OB is in there tapping her foot, talking about how much longer we're going to let this continue to go before we call in the C-section. And then finally, we've basically run out of positions to try. His decelerations are getting really bad, and my midwife looks at me and she says, there's not really much else we can do, and you're not progressing, and there's a good chance he's not going to make it through this with these decelerations. Like his heart rate is not coming back up in between contractions. And so then, of course, I agree to the C-section, sign all the paperwork, and barely have any time to ask any questions or, you know, like, what is my recovery going to be like? What is going to happen in there? Like, I knew nothing about what was about to happen to me. And then, you know, as they're wheeling me down the hall and my husband is gone, because I guess they've swept him up to put on his protective gear or whatever. Nobody tells me anything. They just take him away. They take me away. And then all of a sudden I remember my mom telling me when she had her C-section with me and my twin sister that she wasn't anesthetized the whole way. And so then she had felt her C-section. And so I remember being wheeled in there telling them, please don't let me feel this. Like, please don't let me feel this. My mom felt hers. Please don't let me feel this. And just being basically completely ignored. Luckily, the anesthesiologist, he was lovely. He was like the best part of this whole experience, was he could hear me saying this and telling him this as they're putting in my spinal block. And he's like, look, I hear you. I'm going to tell you that you're not going to feel any of this. And he's telling me about the different types of nerves. And then he's like, and then he's showing me the tests that he's doing. And he's like, look, you can't feel me doing this, right? Oh, can't feel me doing this, right? Yep. And then he said, the final one is pain. And I know that you can't feel what I just did because, and then he shows me these big claws. He's like, I just pinched you with these and you didn't even move. So you're going to be fine, which was so great of him to do that because I was real stressed out about it. So then I have my C-section. They take my baby out. My arms are strapped down. I can't even hold him. Didn't even know I didn't know what the gender was before I had him. So they all of a sudden tell me like, oh, congratulations, you have a little boy. They let me see him. I can't hold him. My arms are strapped down. And then they asked my husband to like come cut the cord and like go hold him and see him without telling him that he won't be allowed back in. He's leaving the room and he won't be allowed back in. So they took my husband and my baby without telling my husband, without telling me. And then all of a sudden the room is very quiet. There's no baby crying. My husband isn't there and I can't see anyone. I can hear them because they're behind the curtain, but I can't see anybody. And they're talking about their weekend, and because this was a Monday, and so they were talking about what they did that weekend. They were talking about what a lovely day it is outside. And then I heard them say, you know what? I'm not going to use sutures this time. I'm going to use staples. And then I heard the stapling noises, and then the curtain finally dropped and they said, okay, we're going to take you to recovery now, and lifted me in the little hoisty machine, put me back on the bed and wheeled me into recovery. By this point, I was very numb. Like I had no, like, not even like physically numb. I was, but like I was emotionally numb. I felt nothing. I had no connection to that baby. When I finally got to hold him, I had no connection to anything. Like I just wanted to leave. And then it ended up taking them a little while to finish up the surgery and all that kind of stuff. And so we were basically at an hour after his birth when I finally got into the recovery room with him. And so rather than one thing on my birth plan that maybe could have worked out was to let him, you know, like crawl up and find the breast himself, that went out the window. They're like, you're at an hour. We're just going to have to like hook this baby on. And he's been crying the whole time you've been being sutured up. He's been screaming bloody murder for almost an hour. So got him nursing, and that was fine. Went to our room, had this baby, just trying to figure it all out. And then it took a really, really long time for the anesthetic to wear off, longer than what's normal. They usually want you up and walking within 12 hours. And I still couldn't feel anything below my waist until the next day. So yeah, and it was really hard the night I'm trying to feed my baby when he's crying. And my husband is sleeping in the room with me, but he can't hear me. So I'm trying to get him to get me the baby, but he can't hear me because he's asleep.
They sleep with the dead, don't they?
I know, yes, it's annoying. But so then I'm trying to find things that I can reach to throw at him. And I'm pressing my nurse call button and nobody's coming. And my baby's just screaming and my husband's sleeping through it. And I'm confined to a bed. And it was just, it just really set the tone for our entire newborn phase. That's kind of what it was I was trying to figure out how to take care of this baby that I felt absolutely nothing for, while also trying to recover from major abdominal surgery that I considered really traumatic. Like, I had no control over anything, and I basically was like a slab of meat on the table. It is how it felt. So yeah, it was rough. It was rough.
Yeah.
As far as C-sections go, my recovery was pretty standard. I didn't have any infection. After about 6 weeks, I was pretty much back to normal. I still have numbness. I still have reoccurring pain once in a while, but that's all very standard with a C-section. So, I did get lucky in that way. I know a lot of people do end up with infections and that sort of thing, which is awful. So I am grateful for that, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember because you told your story when we had our birth trauma group with our midwives, because they had the prenatal drop-in. So even though our babies were basically like, we were due at different times, we ended up in the same basic drop-in because you went late. So that's at least one little blessing, is that we got to meet and connect. And I was told to attend this birth trauma group. And I'm like, I don't think I belong. I mean, I had a vaginal birth. I mean, yeah, I'm a little traumatized by it. I'm a little upset, but I have no right to complain. I mean, I had that mindset of my feelings don't matter. I got a healthy baby and I got a vaginal birth. So what am I complaining about? So I felt, especially when you were telling your story, I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, this beautiful woman, beautiful mother. Like, what am I doing here? And then thinking that, and then telling my story. And then, like, Christine, you actually just were looking at me, and like, we became friends. We bonded. And we started hanging out together because we were in the same area. And our boys played together, and we would just talk. And I think at one point we finally decided, it's like, you know what? The next time if we have a baby, it'll be different. And I was like, I'm having my do-over homework.
Somebody just commented there, I could see, was talking about how, it's funny how we downplay our trauma, which is true. Totally true. And it's not even just us who downplay our trauma. It's everybody else. I remember not having very many people to talk to about it. Like, I could talk to you, the midwives at first. But most people was like, oh, well, but like, his heartbeat wasn't doing well. And aren't you just so glad that he's here and he's healthy? And I'm just like, yeah, I'm real glad he's healthy, but like, I matter. Like, and how I felt about this matters. And the fact that I'm in pain every day, it matters. I'm just supposed, that is our standard, is that we both got out of this alive. Like, that's a pretty low standard. So, I mean, maybe once upon a time that was the best standard, but it certainly shouldn't be what we're striving for now.
Yeah, Lisa, this is that whole healthy baby is all that matters, and at least you had a healthy baby. It's crap. I mean, Christine, you even would get on your soapbox in my own Facebook posts. Like, there was one mom who was getting on us for becoming advocates because at some point we discovered improving birth. And I think it was because there were articles being shared within that midwife group on their page. And you and I were both soaking them up. And so we'd also been following the Fraser Valley Birth Network for a while, because I think we'd been told how to find a doula. And you were another one who was asking about finding a doula on that page, because I remember that post. And like, we were like, you know, this isn't okay. Like, the C-section rates are rising, and it's moms being traumatized, and a healthy baby is not all that matters. We matter too. And this former friend of mine jumped in and basically tried to tear me apart. And then, bless you, you jumped in and said, you listen to me. Like, that's great that you had a great C-section experience, but I hate it. Like, C-sections are stupid and I hate them, is what you said.
They
like,
are
you were
stupid,
really
and I do hate them. And you know what? They're fabulous when you need them. Like, thank God we can do them. But, like, they can still be better. You can improve upon that experience fairly easily. Like, had anybody talked to me or even told me what they were doing, this was not some emergent C-section where I was being put under and like we had minutes. Like, I remember sitting there in my hospital room having contractions, having already signed the paper, and them making calls back and forth between the OR whether it was ready or not. And like, there was time for them to treat me like a person. There was time, and they just didn't take it. They didn't care.
There was time.
Yeah, they didn't care.
Yeah,
that was apparent.
There was time for you to be treated like a person. And they didn't even do skin to skin back then, because I remember our midwife group, they were telling us in the prenatals that if you end up having a C-section, really push for skin to skin in the OR, because they were told they couldn't do it.
Yeah, they wouldn't let me do. Yeah, they wouldn't let me do it in the OR. My husband was the first one to do skin to skin, which, I mean, at least there is some skin to skin. They have that at least, you know. But I desperately wanted, like, I had carried this little human for almost 10 months. And I was not the first person to get to hold him, or the first person to get to see him, or the first person to even know what gender he was. I got nothing that I wanted out of that experience, including, and I had mentioned this before they even brought me into the OR, was that we didn't know the gender and that I had wanted my husband to tell me. It was important to me. It was just something that I wanted.
Yeah, and they could have done that for you.
And they could have done that very easily, but no, the OB, before I even saw him, baby's crying, making noise. Oh, congratulations, you have a little boy. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted my husband to say Yeah. Yeah, you were team green for both of them. I wanted to know. And you were team green.
Fun.
Yeah, you like not knowing. And that's another thing about one size does not fit all, even with empowered pregnancies, because I want to know, because I want to be able to call my children by their names. Like, I have their names all picked out. And I'm like, Hunter, stop kicking mommy in the ribs. It hurts. Like, he knew his name before he was born. And same with Michaela. It's like, Michaela, get your little feet out of there. But I mean, you had
I just gave them nicknames.
Yeah. You just gave yours nicknames. And that's how you bonded. But let's get into how we changed things. Because I mean, really, what were we doing back then? We just saw an improving birth rally, and we're like, so there's nothing here, and nobody's saying anything. So I actually put a post on Facebook, and I was like, I didn't know. I'm like, Christina's been through a hell of a lot, and I don't know if she's ready for this. So I'm just going to put this post out there. And you were like, I'm in. I'm like, I want to do this representation.
I was fueled by pure. Yeah.
You were in. And like, we just stood out in the park that day, and we had our sign, and we didn't know if anybody was going to even show up. Like, we had just started our page, And we started getting followers, and we're like, oh, who are these people who are watching us? And suddenly we would get emails and contacts, and then Wendy joined us. And she's like, I just had a VBAC after 3 cesareans. And we're like, what?
What?
Come join us. Come join us. And Wendy, of course, gave us these.
Yeah, I've got mine on too.
And matching necklaces. What does yours say again?
Mine says HBAC and strong, and then it has the birthstones of my kids.
Yes, I remember it had HBAC on it, but I'm like, is it HBAC warrior or was it HBAC strong? I can't remember. Mine says
HBAC
warrior.
Strong, yeah.
HBAC strong with your birth stones.
God,
that was the best present ever for us. That really was.
It was great, yeah.
You weren't sure if you were going to even have another one. You weren't sure.
I was definitely not going to have another one. Oh,
you even had it set up that he was going to have a vasectomy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like then
he had one a month. It was scheduled. It just, I had a baby in between when we were getting it. It was scheduled.
Yeah. It was a surprise, and it was so funny because it happened like not even a couple of months after I got pregnant with Michaela too.
You know what?
I was very determined.
Yeah, it was right after my sister had a baby, and then you had announced you were pregnant, and then a couple other friends had announced I was pregnant. And I remember joking with my husband, being like, this is the time that it's going to happen by accident. Like, this is the time. And then sure enough, like 2 weeks later, yep, it is the time.
It is the time. It is the time. And I kind of laughed and said, wouldn't it be funny if we both had girls? And we both like end up in the same practice again, and you have a home birth, and you're like, you weren't so sure about having a home birth because you knew what the fight was going to be like.
Yeah, like ideally I would have wanted a home birth, but I knew that it wasn't really something that was like quote unquote allowed. I knew that I could say no to a hospital birth. I knew that I could stay home and I could do all of that, but there would be a fight about it. It would be fighting with OBs and Fraser Health and any other number of people who would want to butt into it. I mean, I ended up having one anyways, but that wasn't originally the plan. I was going to concede that point in order to relieve some stress on myself, because I already knew that I was going to have issues because I was seeking a VBAC. I was going to have issues because I was going to go overdue. And so I just didn't want to add one more thing to that fight.
Yeah, because you were already going to be coming in basically like, I'm not getting on that bed.
Yeah.
Like you were basically, your plan was to labor at home as long as possible so that you would basically be going in pushing. Because
so originally I had talked to my midwife about that. She said, well, normally we want people to come in when it's the 511 or the 411, whatever thing that they
Which
say.
I never know that.
Yeah, well, and she said, but for you, because you have a fear of this hospital and you don't like it and you don't want to be there, my fear for you is if you come in at 411, you're going to slow down. She's like, so I want you to stay as long as it's safe at home as long as possible. And come in when you absolutely like cannot handle it at home anymore. And I was like, cool. That sounds great. I'm going to do that.
Right. And it took a while for us, even for you to find that midwife practice too, because I went and I did the interviews first. So I vetted the first few practices. And then you had another practice that I didn't get into. And what was that experience like first?
I went to a couple of them, but the one that you're talking about in particular was, can I say the name?
No, you can't say the name because we don't want.
I went to midwife. I went to midwife practice, and this was another thing that was different from the first pregnancy. First pregnancy, I just went somewhere. And figured they were basically all the same. Second pregnancy, I was like, no, I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to hire my care provider, and I'm going to hire them based on whether I like what they have to say. And so I went to this midwife, and I told her I want to have a VBAC. You know, this is my general birth plan, so long as everything goes well. You know, yada yada, so forth. And I remember her yeah, I remember her being like, you know, like, oh, having a VBAC, that's great. I've had lots of moms who had VBACs, and I was like, okay, cool. But then I remember her telling me about how she wouldn't let me push for more than an hour because that would increase my risk of uterine rupture. I remember her telling me different things about timelines, about dilation. And
wrong person to tell, eh?
Yeah, and then she was also telling me about how she's done all these VBACs, but she's never, and she did it with a sense of pride, which I can understand why she had a sense of pride about how she's done all these VBACs, but never had any poor outcomes. And now I can see how that would be reassuring for somebody, but for me, I looked at that as, well, it's great that you haven't had any bad outcomes, but does that mean you've done interventions that didn't necessarily need to be done in order to keep that record? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yep.
Not that somebody needs to have like fetal losses or uterine ruptures or anything like that. Like she said, like, I've, you know, and she didn't even know what her VBAC success rate was, which I found also very interesting, like why she didn't have those statistics. And I really wanted, and I got this uneasy feeling that like I was not going to be happy with her. And I had told myself when I found out that I was pregnant that it wasn't going to be like last time when all I wanted to do was say no, and I felt like I couldn't. I felt like I shouldn't, felt like well, they're the doctors, they're the midwives, they know more than I do, so I should just keep quiet and do what they want me to do. And I remember promising myself that I was not going to do that this time. And so I just was like, thank you for your time. I'm interviewing a couple other midwives, and, maybe I'll see you, maybe I won't. And I didn't see her because I was not happy with her. And then I ended up going to the same practice as you, which I was very happy with that interview. And the fact that they were literally next door to my husband's work was also a bonus.
Oh yeah, that's a bonus. You get to go and see them anytime you want when you drop by your husband's work.
I do. I do see them pretty regularly. Yeah.
Tell them I say hi.
Tell them
I have a Facebook now. Tell them you were on it.
Tell them
that we were giving them all the love.
I sure will.
I miss them. I miss them so much.
Oh,
but yeah, I mean, I remember you calling me after the appointment and being just in tears. And I said, just wait until tomorrow. You're going to love it here. I'm telling you right now, you're going to love it here. Because that's just it. I mean,
I remember being apprehensive because I had interviewed one midwife, but she had already upfront told me that I was going to be, if I chose them as the practice, be with a different midwife who was coming in, not a new midwife, but new to that practice. And I remember her telling me that I would be with her. And she's like, but you'll really like her. She's a lot like me. And I was just like, okay, we'll give it a try. And I did. I ended up loving her so much.
We had the same midwife. I loved her so much.
I didn't think you had her.
I had her too.
Oh, okay.
We had the exact same midwife. We didn't have the same backup, but we had the same midwife.
Oh, okay. And so I still text her because her and my daughter have the same birthday. And so I still text her on her birthday every year. And with a picture of my daughter and saying happy birthday, buddy.
Wait, you have her phone number? Oh,
yeah.
you have to give me a phone number so I can text her and tell her, like, I want to get back in connection with her. I have her email, and you know how email is. Like, as moms, like, we forget our email.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I got to get her number. I got to be like, hi, it's me. Look how big she is now. The last time we saw her, Michaela met her, I guess it's 2 years ago now because we had this whole stupid pandemic. But the year before the pandemic, 2019, they had a barbecue because they have the barbecue with the past clients. I know you always had a thing at the same time as the barbecue, so you couldn't go.
Yeah, always, every year.
Always, every year they did it, and you couldn't go, but I would go. And Michaela met her, and she just loves her. And it's so cute watching her because she'll go and look through the pictures on their website, and she's like, "There's my midwife." And she told her, of course, my name, but I'm not going to out people because this might end up going on YouTube at some point, even in part. So I don't want it I don't want to get sued. That's why. Like, I don't think
anybody wants that.
No, we don't want that. Besides, I think you could probably figure out just by the midwives that we really promote out here in Abbotsford. If you are in the Abbotsford area and you're looking for good midwives, of course, you can always message me because I have like the network and I can get you in touch with the good ones and keep you away from the one that Christine just warned you about. But yeah, it was kind of funny because, like, did you go in letting them know that you were with Improving Birth Abbotsford, or did you kind of keep that part under wraps?
I don't know that I told them like right out front, but we were doing Improving Birth work while I was a client. So it definitely was talked about, and we're dropping off pamphlets and business cards.
Yes, we were doing a rally at the same time because we were doing a rally and getting out at the same time. So that we actually had like a two-pronged approach here. We were interviewing and at the same time dropping off.
Yeah.
We were busy because I finally announced my pregnancy at 12 weeks after. And you were still keeping yours kind of under wraps at that point, but it was
I would have been really freshly pregnant then. So yeah,
you were very freshly pregnant. She was just a teeny tiny little speck.
Yeah,
and it was that whole
week would have been Christmas.
Practice.
Yeah,
but that whole practice. I mean, then walk me through it because I remember you texting me after you were past 41 weeks. I mean, you're a 42-week mama. We kind of had the idea that you're probably going to go to 42 weeks again, maybe even a little bit past that. So you weren't that concerned about your due date at that point.
No,
but you were getting weeks.
Yeah, I was always passively hopeful that I would go close to my due date. But I knew that was probably not true. Probably not going to happen. Especially with, finding out more about like my husband's background in that he's one of 10 kids, which is crazy. And all of them came after 41 weeks. So he's got those genetics. And then my sister had her first baby by this time too. And she had gone well over 41 weeks as well. And, I was a twin.
On both sides.
Yeah, and I was a twin at 37 weeks with no signs of coming at all. We were footling breech, and so that's why there was C-section. But so even for twins to go to 37 weeks with no signs of labor, like we just bake a while on both sides of the family. So I was like, okay, this is probably what's going to happen.
Which is by the size of your babies when they're born.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
like if you went to 39 weeks, they'd be tiny.
Yeah, with the first, remember they were telling me that he was going to be like 10 pounds with how I was measuring and with how long he had been in there, and he was under 7. So
yep,
yeah,
6 pound baby, smaller than mine. That is not fair. Yeah, so it was, you were texting both me and Wendy because we both had our messenger, because we were our each other's support. We knew that anybody outside of the friendship circle within our Improving Birth Abbotsford incubator was not going to be very helpful. I mean, I even had it on the side where my husband's friends and their wives were like, well, if Carly's having all this prodromal labor, shouldn't she just have her waters broken and get it over with? And it's like, you tell her that. She's president of Improving Birth Abbotsford. You tell her, because she'll school you. And I mean, so you were really frustrated. I remember that. And then suddenly you said you were going into labor, and it was still early. And I thought, okay, so she'll probably have her baby like in the next few days, because I just dealt with my own prodromal labor with Michaela, and I didn't really realize that you were going to call, like, send a message the next day and say, okay, so she's here, and I had an HBAC. And I'm like, what?
It was kind of a crazy storm. Yeah. So yeah, I was over 41, and I remember talking to the midwife about, like, okay, what is our game plan if I do get to 42? Because then we're going to start feeling some pressure. We're going to get some pressure from the OBs. We're going to get some pressure. Like, what is our game plan here? And she started kind of compiling an idea of OBs that we might be able to approach who would be more likely to induce, if that's the way we wanted to go, because not all OBs feel comfortable inducing a VBAC. And I definitely wanted to, if we had to go a route where we were needing to get the baby out, I wanted to try an induction over going straight to the C-section. So I remember talking, and she's like, okay, well, I think maybe this OB might be open to it. I think this OB might be open to it. And then, and she's like, and how do you feel about sweep? And I was like, well, I don't know. They didn't really work last time. And I know that they can, that they have some risks and stuff. And she said, well, the other thing to consider is your Bishop score. Is if we can increase your Bishop score, an OB is going to be more likely to induce you. So if we can make your cervix more prepared for labor, then maybe an induction will be more on the table. And so I agreed with her there that I would rather take the risk of the sweep and perhaps increase my Bishop score so that I could get an induction should I need it. So then I had agreed to the sweeps, and they were fun. It was fine. Like, it was fine. I remember being really excited though, because with my first, they couldn't even really do any sweeps because there was no dilating, no effacement. And I remember being really excited because she was like, oh, you're a little bit effaced and you're 1 centimeter dilated. And I'm like, I am? I remember being so excited about it. And then, at 41 and 4, I woke up at about 2 a.m. Having some contractions. And they weren't really anything to write home about, but they were uncomfortable enough that I couldn't sleep anymore. So I got up and, did my thing, read a book, walked around, puttered about. Then, finally 7 a.m. rolls around and my husband gets up and I'm like, look, I've been having contractions about every 45 minutes since like 2 a.m. I've been up forever. I got all this stuff done and I did this and I did that because whatever. And he's like, okay, do you want me to stay home from work? And I was like, I don't think you have to stay home from work. They haven't even increased it. Like, since 2 a.m. they've been every 45 minutes. Like, they haven't even they've stayed the same. And I'm fine. Like, I can even walk through them. I can breathe through them. Like, they're not a big deal. Okay, great. I'll go to work. Okay, fine, I'll go to work. Make sure you keep your phone on you just in case, whatever. Okay, cool. So then I just go about my day with my then 3-year-old, and, you know, we go do our thing, we go to the park, we go for a walk, and all day long I'm still having them like every 45 minutes. And I'm like, okay, like, but they aren't going away. And so I remember texting my husband being like, man, I'm going into labor. Like, it's happening. Like, nobody is giving me drugs and it's happening. I remember being really excited about it. I'm like, but it could be days and I don't even care. I'm contracting on my own and being real excited about it. So it just continued on that way for the rest of the day. And then, you know, we had dinner. We went for a walk as a family after dinner. And then that's when things sort of started to pick up. We went for that walk after dinner. And all of a sudden, I couldn't walk through them anymore. I had to stop. And I remember having a contraction along a really busy road by my house. And I'm leaning against the light post while my husband is like trying to wrangle the 3-year-old. And I remember somebody pulling over being like, are you okay? And I'm like, good. It's fine. This is supposed to be happening. I'm fine. And then, so then we got home, and they're a little bit closer together now. They're probably about every 20 minutes, every 15, 20 minutes. And so then we're getting the baby ready for, he's not really a baby, but getting him ready for bed, putting him to bed. And I remember I told my husband, I said, you know, they're starting to get really uncomfortable. I'm going to hop in the shower and see if I can just like get through bedtime without you, because you need to put him to bed or whatever. So then he goes and he puts him to bed, and then he comes and finds me in the shower, and I am not doing well. Like, I am in pain. And they're still about every 10 minutes apart. And I remember I was like, can you call the doula? Can you call her? Like, I'm not coping very well. And he's like, okay. So then he calls the doula, and she's like, you know, if they're every 10 minutes, I typically don't like to come till it's every 7 because you might really slow down. But if you're really not doing well, then I'll come. Like, of course I'll come. If you want me to come, I will come. And I said, please come. This is not going very well. Like, I'm in pain. So then we phoned our babysitter, and the doula is the next town over. It's about 30-minute drive for her. And in that amount of time, in that 30 minutes, I had kind of found a groove that I was into, and I was no longer really feeling that pain as soon as I had my husband back and got near my birthing ball and found a position that I liked. And then I was doing okay, but we were just waiting for everybody to come. So the doorbell rings, in comes doula, and they are maybe a minute apart at this point. Like, I went from 0 to 60 real fast. And she's like, oh, okay, we're in it. Here we go. And then she's like, okay, we have to go. Like, they are too close together. We have to go. And we're like, oh, the babysitter's not here yet. And then she's like, you need to go get a neighbor because we need to go. So my husband is just about to leave out the door to go ask a neighbor to watch the house and watch the kid, and my water breaks. And she's like, okay, I need you to reach down and I need you to tell me what you feel. And so I reached down and I could definitely feel a head. And I was like, I think I feel a head. Like, okay, we're not going anywhere. And then so called my husband back, said, you need to call an ambulance. I'm going to call the midwife and say, we're not going to make it to the hospital. So husband's calling an ambulance. She's calling the midwife. It turns out one of the midwives from the practice, who was not my midwife, but was at the practice, and I had met her, lives only like a block or 2 away. And so she was called and said, like, whoa. And the ambulance arrived shortly after her. She came in with all her home birth stuff, and she put a Doppler on there, said, this is a happy baby. This is great. And then I remember, and this was like so important to me, and it's why I remember it so well. It's like burned into my brain. I remember her checking, you know, the station of the baby, and her saying, look, you are not like, she's not that descended into your pelvis. Like, you're -2 or +2 or whatever. You have time to go to the hospital if you take the ambulance. And I remember being given just the time to ask the questions about it. I said, okay, well, like, what, at this point, I've been feeling the urge to push already as soon as my water broke. And so we're waiting for these people to arrive, and I'm being told not to push. And like, it hurts not to push when you have the urge to push. And I remember between contractions being like, what happens here? If I go to the hospital, I have to go in the ambulance. And she's like, yep. And then I was like, can I push in the ambulance? Nope, you can't push in the ambulance. And I said, do I have to be laying on my back on that gurney in the ambulance? And she looks at the paramedic for the answer. She says, no. And they're like, yep, you're going to have to be strapped to that gurney. It's not safe to transport you any other way. And I remember like just feeling so defeated about that idea. Like, there's no way I can do that. Like, being on my back is like torture. And then not being able to push is like worse torture. And she looked at me and she looked at me in the eye and she said, if you want to stay, I will stay with you. I'm not going to leave you. I have to recommend that you go to the hospital because there is time and you are a VBAC. I'm recommending you go to the hospital, but if you choose to stay, I will stay with you. And I was like, then I'm staying. And she's like, great. And then sent the paramedics away. And my husband grabbed a shower curtain and towels, and off we went to the races. And then my midwife, who was my actual midwife, arrived after that. And we just went ahead and pushed a baby out, and I had her in my living room. So, and then we ended up needing to transport the hospital for other reasons, but she was already out and I had already had her by the time we went to the hospital. So, yeah, it happened real fast.
I think you said you had a tear.
Yeah, so what had happened?
Something, and that's.
Yeah, so she was trying to come out with her hand by her face, and because I was so overdue, she had pretty long fingernails. Yeah. And then also the other thing was she had cut me with her fingernails, and that had made me bleed. And then, but they couldn't find out where the bleeding was coming from. And so then there was the worry that I had ruptured. And so they were feeling, my uterus during a contraction. They said, you still have a contraction here. That's great. You need to get this baby out with this contraction because we may lose if you are rupturing. We're not going to get any more contractions and we're pretty far from the hospital. Like, you need to get this baby out. And I was like, okay, you want her out she comes. And so we did, because before that I was doing, trying to do it slowly so that there was no tearing and all that. But they said it's go time. And so yeah, I had pushed her out on that contraction, and it turned out to be fine. There was no rupture, there was nothing. It was just from her fingernails and tearing.
Yeah.
So. But you can't know that until the baby's away, right? Yeah.
So I have Lisa here. She's our scholarship winner for the Take Charge of Birth program, the full partial scholarship. And she wants to know if you can speak a bit to the recovery after a C-section versus a vaginal birth. So, how did you feel after that back?
Well, interesting story. So after my C-section, it would be considered an easy C-section recovery. I couldn't do stairs or housework or do anything other than lift my baby for 2 weeks at least. My husband had to help me out of bed for nursing. It was hard to lay down. It was hard to sit up. And yeah, lifting things was painful for quite a while, especially if it was considerably heavier than the baby. And we actually lived in an apartment at the time with a broken elevator. So I was actually stuck in the house for a few weeks because I couldn't do the stairs, which was awful. But I was pretty much mostly back to normal as you get after the C-section within 6 weeks. Yeah. After my VBAC, we were at the hospital and the babysitter texted and said, Michael's throwing up. And I was like, oh, great. So the 3-year-old is at home throwing up, wants daddy. Daddy's at the hospital with me, but I don't really need him. I was up right away at the hospital after getting stitches. I was up right away and took a shower, which was the best shower ever. I was picking her up. Yeah, like I was picking her up. I was feeding her. I really didn't need him. And so I said, look, you're going to get more sleep at home. All he wants is you. He doesn't want the babysitter. Like, why don't you just go home and take care of him, and you can come get me in the morning. I'm fine. I've got her. I've got this. And so that was fine. I was at the hospital by myself with my baby, just taking care of her. And then he texted me in the morning, I don't feel good. I'm throwing up. Great.
Oh,
no. So he did end up coming to pick me up from the hospital because I said, there's no way I'm staying here. I'm either taking a cab home or you're coming to pick me up because I'm not staying here. I hate it here. I want nothing to do with this place. And so he did come pick me up and we went home. And so my kid is sick and throwing up. My husband is sick and throwing up. And I am now taking care of 3 people and no problem. No problem. There was no way if I had had a C-section, I would be able to do that. We would have had to, I don't know, call people. And I don't even know who we would call because who wants to come take care of people throwing up? Like it, I ended up having a 2nd-degree tear, but because it was so high up, there's not really a lot of nerve endings there. So I had pretty much no pain. The most painful thing was the contractions with nursing, but you would get those.
Oh yeah.
Whether you had a C-section or not. So that was honestly the most uncomfortable thing. I was thrown right back into the caregiver thing, and it was easy. I mean, that's not always true for everybody who has a vaginal birth. Sometimes it can be hard to recover. Some people have super easy recovery from C-sections. Like it really does depend on the person. But for me, it was night and day. Like it was no problem at all. I also was bonded to her right away. Like I actually couldn't sleep, not because I was in pain or because I was traumatized, but because I couldn't stop looking at her, which was really weird for me because with the first, I didn't really feel any connection. It was hard to sleep because I was just like traumatized, and I would be dreaming about being in the OR and being chopped up like hamburger. But with her, I couldn't sleep because I just wanted to look at her all the time. I loved her. She was the greatest thing that ever happened, and birth was the best thing that ever happened. And let's do it again.
Fortunately, he has
Yeah.
Right? Oh God,
I was real ready to do it again. I was like, cool, yeah, let's push another human out. Let's do it.
Such a transformation, hey? I mean, just afterwards, and then what you did in deciding to homeschool your kids afterwards, and just you're living your best life, Christine. You really are.
Well, yeah, we're in it.
I mean, yeah, I know everything.
Homeschooling turned out to be a really good decision for the last 2 years at least.
Your kids are thriving. I'm amazed by you. I was amazed by you before, and how much you had to deal with, and to become a team member for Improving Birth Abbotsford. And just, you were shining. And for the longest time, I was the shy one. I'm like, I'm not going to be the one that talks. You're going to be media spokesperson. You can talk to the media. I can't do it. And then we ended up that we both were doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it really.
That's very sweet.
Yeah. I mean, it was fate. And our boys are the same age. And I mean, Michael's birthday's coming up. So you've got that.
It's next week. Mm-hmm.
And Hunter's next month. I can't believe our boys are going to be 8.
I know.
8 years we've been doing this.
Yeah.
8 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's just that recovery. I remember having to remind you because I got the same thing from my midwife where I went shopping like not even 12 hours after Michaela was born. Like I remember I had this prodromal labor and I was just done being stuck home.
Yeah.
I was done not being able to walk around out places. So it's like, no, we're going to McDonald's and we're going to Walmart and I'm going to walk around because I'm able to walk again and I'm not heavy and pregnant. I've got this cute little squishy baby on the outside. And I remember these women came up to me and like, oh my goodness, a fresh baby. How old? And I'm like, I think maybe 12 hours. And they're like, and you're walking around? I'm like, yeah, I feel great.
Mm-hmm. That birth high is like just a real thing. Like birth high is a thing for sure.
Like you just, I couldn't sleep either after Michaela's birth. I mean, it's just so different. And it was so perfect that we both had girls. And then I also shared my milk because I know that you had issues there. And just the abundance of milk. And so like I'm like, it was just having that plan ahead is really what it came down to. You knew going into your birth what you were walking into in your pregnancy. And you really put yourself in the position of power instead of fear. Like you knew.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew what I was getting into. And I remember when you are a VBAC client with a midwife or even with a doctor, if you're not with an OB, you have to have an OB consult. And I remember talking to my midwife about this consult, and then we were talking about who she would refer me to. And then we had decided together to refer me to the high risk OB because this would be nothing for him. And it really was. When I went to go see him, he comes into the room, he looks at my chart, says, why are you here? And I was like, oh, I'm here for a VBAC consult. And he's like, VBAC consult? What are you doing here? Like, it's so silly that they make you guys do this. And then he closes my file and he sits down and he looks at me and he says, do you want a 20% chance of being cut open or a 100% chance of being cut open? And I was like, I'll take the 20%. And he's like, great, I'll sign off on it. And I'm like, okay. He's like, you want to push your baby out? Push your baby out. Yeah, you want to push your baby out? Push your baby out. And I'm like, okay.
I love him. I'm so sorry he's probably retiring now. But
yeah. But I mean,
we need more OBs like
high risk pregnancies. VBAC to him is not high risk. He's like, this is silly that they make you do this. You want to push a baby out? Push a baby out. There's no sweat off my back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically who you get as your VBAC consult that would really make all the difference. Yeah.
Well,
Jenny,
it would be really, it'd be really easy for someone to scare you off of a VBAC. He's an awesome doctor. Yeah, I liked him a lot. I mean, I only saw him for like 5 minutes, but the 5 minutes was great. Great 5 minutes.
Well, yeah, because he wasn't telling you all the scary stats.
No, I mean, he did inform me. He's like, there are risks. We don't have an OR ready 24/7. He's like, if you are one of the people who has a rupture and it's a catastrophic rupture, there is a risk there that we may lose you, we may lose your baby. And he's like, but the risks are really low. I have to tell you about them, but they're really low. And I was like, I am willing to take that risk. So he signed off.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it comes down to, is that we all approach risk in different ways too. Like we were talking about this all the time at the rallies because people would be like, well, the risk of uterine rupture. We'd say, okay, but if you look at this chart, and we had our flow charts and everything. Lisa is saying, my OBGYN told me the risks were too high when in reality it's not, according to my research since the appointment discussing that. Isn't that kind of like what happened with Wendy too?
Yeah, the thing is that yeah, the thing is that with risk, it's really up to the individual to decide whether that's too much risk or not. I mean, you look at, for me, I was willing to take that risk for a VBAC. I was willing to go past 42 weeks. That was a risk I was willing to take. Whereas I have friends and family who were not willing to take that risk. They said, nope, that's too high for me. I don't want that risk of stillbirth going after 42 weeks. I'm going to induce. And that's fine. If you're making an informed choice and saying, look, that's too much risk for me, then that's fine. That's your choice. If that's too much for you and you want to go ahead with whatever intervention it is, then great. All the power to you. But yeah, it's not up to your OB or your midwife to decide what is too much risk for you. You get to decide that.
Yeah.
It's their job. It's their job to give you the factual information, and you get to decide from there what you're willing to take on and what you're not willing to take on. I don't think anybody is going to the end of a pregnancy just to take such huge risks that like there's a good chance that they or their baby might have a bad outcome. I don't think there's anybody out there who's like, yeah, that sounds like what I want. So, you know, it's silly.
Well, you know as well as I do what's behind that. It's the profit, convenience, and liability issues, really. But I mean, we knew the system because we were in it for 2 years, just doing all of our advocacy. And of course, I found the stats. Well, you actually found the stats for me. Because remember, you were the one who went, I said, can you find these prenatal stats? And you called up Fraser Health. And how long did it take you to find that website?
Oh, I think I emailed and called at least a dozen times. It took me a couple months to track anything down. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were like, why do you want
information they wanted to give up easily? Yeah. And I remember they asked, what do you want it for? And I'm like, but I'm a taxpayer and you're a government institution and this is supposed to be published information. You should just give it to me.
We were like, well, what are you going to do with it? It's like, it doesn't matter what I'm going to do with it. I legally deserve to have it. Like, it's my right to have these stats. And when you finally found it, it was like magical. It was just magic. It's like, ooh, look what we've got to play with. And I was just blown away by the numbers. And yeah, I mean, that's where we really were able to show what our rates of induction were and what you would want as a plan for induction too. You'd even had kind of what you wanted for your, if you induce, and how you wanted that to go. So you really had a lot of backup plans.
Yeah, we had a C-section birth plan, we had a VBAC birth plan, we had what drugs in what order should I decide that I want them. We had contingency.
But I know that it is almost dinner time. I have to feed these gremlins, and I know you have to feed yours.
Sure do, yeah.
We got to have you back again because, I mean, you and I, our dynamic was always so great. And we're doing so much better than our rally that I looked back on our old video from 2018 and I'm like, oh my God, is that us? Like, we were so awkward on camera. We didn't know what we were doing. Yeah, we definitely have to get on again together. Anything you want to discuss, we'll figure that out. And thank you so much for sharing your story. This is going to be so, it's inspiring. Your story is inspiring. It always has been. And I mean, you have always been able to articulate yourself so well too. I mean, come on, first of all, we had a lot of practice with improving birth. And just being able to give people that confidence to be like, yeah, like you're the decision maker, you're the consumer. You don't need to come to your birth in a place of fear, come to it from a place of power. So I love you, and hopefully you can come into the chat and catch the live streams that I've been doing. I know you've been trying to play catch up while your kids have been otherwise occupied. I know you're a very busy mom.
Yes, but I did watch one yesterday, and it was great.
Yeah, and you know, Jenny says yes, she's definitely feeling inspired after watching you. I told you, Christine is just amazing. Like she was my number 2 in, like, we were basically a team running Improving Birth Abbotsford, and then for a little while Empowering Moms as well, until I turned it into the business side, and Wendy and Christine to go their own way. And I'm like, you know what? I am still here, and I will just bring in more team members, and I love you all, and you can always come back anytime that you want to help, because it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
I believe you.
Oh, gosh. Like, I remember we had handouts all the time, and like I'd be handing you things to print off, and then you would find something else that we would be doing. And you even had a family member in the maternity care system that you mentioned, like you said, you know, you kind of need to make the cesarean experience a little bit better and do skin to skin in the OR. Guess what, Christine? That's happening now.
That's great.
Like, they have skin to skin cesareans in our hospital.
Yeah, I also heard that they're considering the clear drape. I don't know if they have them yet, but I've heard they're considering them at the very least, which would be great to be able to see your baby right away. I mean, obviously, if you're comfortable with the clear drape, some people don't want to see you, and that's also fine. But I would have loved to be able to see.
Just having the option. I mean, it's not going to be difficult to have clear drapes and then the regular drape and just switch them out. I mean, it's a curtain. I'm pretty sure they have to clean the curtains and wash them anyway. Jenny says they offered her to do skin to skin in the OR, but she couldn't do it. She was very much out of it with her birth. But, you know, her midwife actually helped her with the golden hours. She was nursing on her when she was still out of it, which was absolutely beautiful. Just that's the thing, is that when you know your options, you can really plan. I mean, you even had a pretty empowered cesarean plan.
Oh yeah.
Like you knew what you would want in that situation. Like we knew that too.
I don't super remember, but I know that it included not having my arms strapped down. I know it included skin to skin right away in the OR, and I knew that I had the right to tell them not to take him away or her away. So I knew that I could be like, no, we're doing skin to skin. Like, my arms aren't strapped. Give me my baby. So that was the plan. I don't remember what other stuff I had in there. I think I had plans for like particular music to be played. Hang on.
I think that is your cue that the gremlins are hungry and fighting.
My husband is home, so she's not completely ignored, but I should probably go.
Yeah, I need to go too, because my husband is not home and the gremlins are hungry, and I've got to put a lasagna in the oven. But thank you so much, Christine, and I will see you there. Lisa says she had no idea there were so many options for C-sections. Well, Lisa, you are in the Take Charge of Birth elite program here. So you now have access to me and all of my wealth of knowledge. And Christine was my VBAC queen at one point. And she went and pulled out all of the great VBAC that is now inside the Empowered Birth Library. that I am gifting you. So guess what? You're going to just be blown away by how many options there are to plan for an empowered C-section.
Yeah.
There are lots. And there's more now, Christine. Like, I've got over 900 resources in that library now.
Oh my goodness,
like,
that is a lot.
I know, and I only had like what, 500 before. Like, I was like, here, Wendy, here, Christine, this is how we can get our articles. And you're like, whoa, what did you just do?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, where do you find the time, woman? I'm like, I don't know, I just like to write. But yeah, I'm gonna go eat, and I will talk to you later. Thank you so much, and we need to get together when the whole stupid pandemic is over.
As soon as it's over.
As soon as it's over. This is stupid. This is stupid. I want it over.
Me too. I think everybody does.
Yeah. Okay, Christine. Bye.